Well, you guys are good. Thanks for taking our 30-second warning. I appreciate it. I'm Myron Martin, and I'm the president and CEO of the Smith Center. It's my pleasure to welcome you here tonight. So as I was walking around the room, I saw a lot of my friends who said things like, we've been to Reynolds Hall a bunch of times. We've never been in this room. I counted like 14 people. How many, this is your first time ever in here? It's a lot more than 14 people. Okay, keep your hands raised because security. No, we're so glad you're here, and this is the perfect excuse to introduce you to something that maybe you hadn't seen before. Branford Marsalis called this the best-sounding jazz club in America. So we hope you'll come back and hear some music in here sometime. The Smith Center has been open nearly 6 years now. We've greeted more than 2 million patrons coming through our doors. And I'm maybe even more excited to say 400,000 students have found their way here for daytime performances, workshops, master classes. Yeah, thank you. We've done lots of community events, weddings, memorial services, just about anything you can imagine, commencement exercises. We've done the biggest names that tour the world, and we've highlighted artists who make their homes right here in Las Vegas. But tonight we get to do something new, and I'm so thrilled because it means that we get to see all of you. So it's a real pleasure for me to say, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome John Ralston.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. The good news is I will not be singing or dancing tonight, which is what you usually see up there. A lot of people are thankful. Yeah, you can applaud. That's fine. I really am so thrilled that all of you could come tonight to the first of our, what I hope will be a long-running series here at the Smith Center called IndyTalks. I hope that most of you, if not all of you, are familiar with the Nevada Independent, which is this little nonprofit adventure in journalism that we started on January 17th of this year. We're going to have our year anniversary pretty soon, and it's been by far the most exhilarating experience of my journalism career. And of all the jobs that I've had before and got fired from, this is by far the best one. And the reason it's the best one is because of the people that I work with. And Elizabeth Thompson, many of you know, who was my number 2, and that really means she's here. And when I say she's my number 2, many of you know me, you know that means she's really number 1, and she runs the place, and she is as invaluable as anyone to this operation, and she was the first person I approached about this. And then they're the people that really make this operation what it is, and they're in the back. My reporters are back there. I hope they'll wave. Megan Messerly, Riley Snyder, Luce Gray, Jackie Valley's back there too, I think. Am I right? Michelle Rindels is there too. Michelle just did a very important interview and rushed over here. They're always working. I can't believe their energy and enthusiasm and how much they think Elizabeth and I are superfluous to the operation. So I am glad that they're here tonight with us. We are thrilled with what we've been doing so far. We're now approaching 100,000 readers a month, and we're growing every month. But thank you. Yeah, please. Thank you. Thank you. This is the shameless pitch part. We need sustaining members. We need everybody here. We have members that give $5 a month all the way up to very large corporate donors. And we're about to announce a new one pretty soon, by the way, that we're thrilled to get. But we need your help. So please help if you can. And when you leave here tonight, go accost people on the street, knock on your neighbors' doors, do whatever's necessary. I realize that's what a nonprofit's all about. In this IndyTalks series, which we're going to start doing quarterly, if you're a member, you get preference on tickets, as many of you already know. I want to announce the next one. We are thrilled to have the governor here tonight. He has a very busy schedule, even though he's kind of a lame duck and doesn't do much anymore. But he came anyhow to be here tonight. Our second one, you can mark the date on your calendar. We've already locked in here in Myron's beautiful room. By the way, Please give a round of applause for Myron, who has been so generous here. And we love what he's done. Our next one is going to be on April 24th. As many of you know, I have somewhat of an interest in politics, and filing is going to close in March, and right after filing is closed, we're going to do a major poll on the races and major issues by the national pollster Mark Mellman, and he will be here on April 24th to release those results on that night right here in this room, and so we hope you can come. I want to thank our event sponsor for tonight. We are thrilled, and they're right here in front here, the Nevada Association of Realtors. Can we give them a round of applause, please, for sponsoring the first IndyTalks. And I also want to thank our media partner, the Greenspun School of Journalism. I don't know who that's named for. They're recording and producing this, and we will have it online by the end of the week, and you can listen to it on the podcast as well. We are really committed to partnering with UNLV. We're going to have a partnership, we hope, with UNR as well, and maybe with the school district in some form. And we actually made a point of inviting up-and-coming students who are sitting right here up front. Let me introduce them. These are the UNLV journalism students. First, Chase Christensen, Bruce Gill, and Sebastian Ross. Stand up, say hello. And from the Clark County School District, they're sitting here right here in the best seat in the house. We have Bailey Moore and Jillian Gallibert. Stand up, go ahead. I know some of you were hoping that you were going to be able to throw questions up here, but the governor's on a tight schedule, and I do have some experience asking questions, so you're going to have to count on me for that. So let me introduce our guest of honor. I was thinking about this today. I've known the governor for almost a quarter of a century now, around there. I am sorry, and he can't help this, he has not aged as well as I have. Let me tell you some things you may not know about Governor Brian Sandoval. I met him when he won an assembly seat. Anybody know whose seat? Some of you in here do. Jim Gibbons' seat. If only Gibbons knew then what he knows now. At 35, Brian Sandoval became the youngest ever chairman of the Nevada Gaming Commission. He later became the Attorney General, and then he was appointed to the federal bench after being nominated by a guy named Harry Reid, who just may have been looking ahead to an election, as well as recognizing the governor's amazing legal talents. If only Rory and Harry knew, well, never mind, okay. Way back in the day, the governor may not even remember this, before either of us had any gray in our hair, the governor and I used to play basketball together. He was, as you might imagine he was, steady, reliable, a team player, couldn't jump that high. In fact, I may have blocked his shot once or twice back in the day, but my memory's hazy. I also think that he couldn't go to his right. I'll be here all week. Right, Myron? Since then, the governor has blocked, or may I say ignored, some of my shots of a different kind. But there's always been a mutual respect between us. I think I drive him crazy sometimes. But the governor is a true student of history. And he would never say this, but I will as I introduce him, that he will be remembered as one of Nevada's greatest governors. Ladies and gentlemen, Brian Sandoval.
Thank you.
Have a seat. Governor, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
I hope we'll have a conversation about a wide range of things tonight. Now, first, I want to start by talking about what a lot of people in this country are talking about, which is the national atmosphere in politics, and especially there's a election a week from today in Alabama, of what it means to be a Republican, what it means to be a conservative. You have Donald Trump, Roy Moore, you have the Republican establishment. They're unrecognizable from each other. I know labels can be fascinating. I don't know who these people are. Some people have called you a rhino in the past, not a real conservative. I'm wondering if you've thought about this at all, and what does it mean to be a Republican, and do you consider yourself a conservative?
A couple things. Yes, I consider myself a conservative, and I'm a proud Republican. I'm not happy with some of the things that are happening nationally. I've gone, as you alluded to in the introduction, not really gone with the party on a lot of things. I have been called a rhino. I don't have to go to many Lincoln Day dinners anymore, so that's but
this is better than a Lincoln Day dinner.
Yes,
I'm glad to
is.
hear it. Okay.
But in any event, I made a solemn promise to myself a long time ago that, particularly in this position, it is a privilege and honor to serve as the governor of the great state of Nevada. I'm proud of this state. This state has given me everything that I have. This is, I truly believe my story is a story that I tell to school children all the time, that this is still a place that you can be whatever you want to be. You just got to work for it. But responding to your question, I've just, as I said, I have been unconventional. I know that, but I've made my decisions based on what I felt was in the best interest of the state, and whether that be healthcare, whether that be education, whether that be tax policy, I could go on and on. I have diverted, but at the same time, I think the state's better for it. We're in the best fiscal position that we've been in for many, many years. Our schools are better. We've diversified our economy. We made a great announcement tonight that we've paid off an $800 million bond from the Unemployment Trust Fund, and we now have over $1 billion in that trust fund. So, I'm hoping that, history will be, my judge, and we'll see what happens after that. But, I still consider myself a Republican, and a proud Republican, and will always be a Republican.
You didn't address the other word that I mentioned, though, which is conservative. A lot of people don't think that Brian Sandoval is a conservative. And again, I don't like labels myself, and I think it doesn't tell a lot about the person to say they're a conservative or a moderate or a liberal. How would you describe yourself? Are you a conservative?
Well, I guess it depends on how you define a conservative. I feel like I'm a fiscal conservative. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, the largest tax increase in history.
Yes, but it also is invested in every child in the state of Nevada, and I will never apologize for that. But you talk to my staff, you talk to my budget director. I watch every penny. And yes, I did have the largest tax increase in the history of our state, but we've invested it, and we've invested it wisely, and we've invested in the people of our state, and I make sure that it's accountable and every penny is spent well, and so far so good. But that's one of the hard things, or I should say, I'm one of those that has learned that lesson. It's very different from being a candidate and governing. And we came in 8 years ago, 7 years ago, in the worst fiscal situation in the history of our state. We were $2 billion budget deficit, and I did say at the time that I wasn't going to raise taxes, but I said that because you're not going to tax businesses when there's 14% unemployment and we owe the federal government $800 million, all those things. But ultimately, as I sat in the governor's chair, I learned very quickly that we needed to invest in our children and in our schools for the benefit of the state and for the benefit of them. So, there's a reason why I dedicated my State of the State to the generations to come.
Are you a conservative or a moderate, or are you even a liberal Republican?
You tell me. I guess it just depends. I've heard it all. I've heard being accused of a rhino, and you know what? If that means I'm a rhino based on the decisions I made, and people have better health care, and kids have a better education, and the state's in the best fiscal position that it's ever been, then guilty as charged.
Governor, sometimes people forget this about both politicians and journalists, but you're a human being too. And did it get to you? The criticism, that kind of criticism, does it bother you?
It does, but it doesn't. It is never fun to be criticized, and it's not fun to be booed. But as I said, I'd rather get an honest boo than a hollow cheer. I'm not going to tell people what they want to hear. I'm going to tell them what I think is in the best interest of the state of Nevada. So, again, I guess it is. I told somebody I'm a lion in winter, but I'm still a lion. And I've got a year to go, and I'm going to work extremely hard. I'm not going to let off the gas here. I've told my cabinet, I've told my staff, we have a lot to get done. And I want to make sure that, this is a legislative year that we implement effectively everything that we got passed this session. And so I'm going to continue to work hard.
We'll get to what you're going to do in your final year a little bit later. Let me just wrap up this part of the discussion by, do you wake up in the morning and look at what's happening in Washington and look at what Donald Trump is doing to the Republican Party, and do you shake your head?
I do. In all honesty, you're making news tonight, John.
That's your job.
Yeah. No, but I guess to finish the other question, and then I'll get to that, is,
Okay.
the criticism, but then again, you have your quiet moments. And this is what I told the legislators who supported me during that tax increase, during that session, is that, we're not going to be in elected office for the rest of our lives, that it is a gift, public service is a gift, and you have to take advantage of that gift. And there's going to be that day when you look back and you're going to say, did I make the decision just so I could stay in office and I could be called sir or madam or whatever title it is? Or are you going to look back and say, I made a difference and I did things for people? So back to your question, I do shake my head. You said I'm a student of history. Things are very cyclical, and we're in a very different cycle that, is different. I'm a disciple of Paul Laxalt. I had the privilege of doing an internship for him when I was in college in 1984, and I really tried to model myself after him. I also had the opportunity when I was in the legislature to work with Bill Raggio and Joe Dini, and these are people that really made a big imprint on me on how you conduct yourselves and how you work together to solve problems, but be principled at the same time. And then finally, when I was Attorney General, Kenny Gwinn was the governor, and I had a gift of being able to work with him. And the phone would ring, and he'd say, "Brian, come across the street. Let's have a chat." And I would walk across the street, and we really wouldn't talk about anything, but it really meant a lot to me that he would take that time. And right now, politically, we're in this place that, and as I said, it's tough to watch. People are angry, they're frustrated, and I've been one who always tries to work across the aisle. I call it personal diplomacy. When the legislators are elected, I meet with every freshman legislator, learn what their priorities are, see if we can work together. I'm sure the veto word's going to come up later on in this conversation, and yes, I've got my lines as well, but I always try to work together with others. I don't see that happening right now, and I'm hoping it'll change. And I try to set an example for other people that I work with, but Washington's pretty toxic right now.
Have you ever had a conversation with the president, a meaningful conversation?
I've had a conversation. Yes, I've had a meaningful conversation.
It's too late.
No.
Guys, get that out on the site.
No, so I've been at the White House. Now you're making me laugh. I had an opportunity to speak at the White House with regard to educational policy and an executive order that he had signed. I will say this, that it was very meaningful to me that he came to Las Vegas after the shooting on October 1st. He didn't have to do that, and he did call immediately after it happened, and I had a conversation with him, and he offered his condolences and said that he was going to come out. So that went a long way. The White House is accessible to me at any time in terms of having conversations. I'm in a position now where I'm the chairman of the National Governors Association, so that gives me access as well with regard to the cabinet. I've established good relationships with all the cabinet members, and again, have the ability to have those phone calls. So yes, I can't say that I've had a lengthy conversation with him, but we have spoke several times.
You mentioned National Governors Association, and I appreciate the good segue you presented to me here, because I want to talk to you. Terry McAuliffe, the governor of Virginia, who you work with at the NGA, I saw something he said recently, and he said the real job of a governor essentially is very simple. It's to create jobs. That is really what it is, and everything else is secondary. I know that's been a focus of yours. When you came into office, we were in terrible shape here. And I'm wondering if you look back, when you look at the metrics, you can talk about a lot of jobs that were created. You can talk about some of the economic development successes. There's also some evidence that wages have lagged behind. And I'm wondering if you're satisfied with what the economy is doing now. And if you think, obviously we've come back from a recession, unemployment was close to 15%. Now it's about a third of that. Are you satisfied with the Nevada economy?
No, I'm never satisfied. I wake up and go to bed. And I had this conversation with somebody today, and I made that announcement here with regard to unemployment, and we had lost 175,000 jobs. That unemployment is, as you said, was 14%. We had the highest rate of foreclosures, highest rate of bankruptcies, as I said, a $2 billion structural deficit, and I still remember, seeing all these people out of work, and I was very determined to diversify the economy and, as I said, just simply get people back to work so they could provide for their families, so that they could make their house payment and live a good life. But I don't think that job is ever done. We've had some incredible economic development victories, and I know I've been the subject of criticism from you and others.
Never.
And that's fine.
The criticism I think you're referring to, and it's an interesting subject. We just had Steve Hill on the podcast, and we talked about this a little bit too, which essentially there's a lot of people in the city who think, God, yeah, it's great that we got Tesla, it's great that we're getting these other Apple, et cetera, but you gave away the store to get them, Governor. Essentially, you said, we got to play this tax incentive game, so whatever you want, Elon Musk will give you. You can have everything you want.
Well, that's exactly how it went. I should have brought, somebody handed me a headline from the Reno Gazette-Journal, October 10th, 2010, Reno, Detroit of the West. And they had hired an economist and a group to study the state or study their economy and study economic development and what we needed to do. And what will this state look like in 10 years? And as I said, we have done all those things. I'm going to get to the abatements and the incentives. it's you got to play in the real world, and the real world is that states are competing for that, and I could have played it safe. And
why do we get into the game? Why should we have competed for that?
Well, I could talk about $80 billion of economic impact over the next 20 years. I could talk about 8,000 direct jobs and another 30,000 indirect jobs. I could talk about the fact that landing Tesla, and I've had the privilege of leading trade missions all over the world, and when I travel, wherever I go, whether it's China, South Korea, South America, Europe, Canada, they said, how'd you do it? Australia, how did little Nevada be able to land that Tesla? And Tesla has actually exceeded all our expectations and what they promised in terms of job production. It has completely changed northern Nevada in terms of what's happening there. It has brought many other companies that are there. So now, it's becoming more and more apparent here in southern Nevada, but in northern Nevada, the biggest challenge for employers is finding employees. The biggest challenge is that you have a vacancy rate of less than 1% up there. Housing prices have skyrocketed. I will take those problems any day compared to 15% unemployment and leading the country in foreclosures and 80% of the people being upside down in their mortgages. But it really was a catalyst, a massive catalyst. And I hear it repeated over and over again when Elon Musk said on the steps of the Capitol, it's the get it done state. You heard Roger Goodell say it in another subject I'm sure we'll talk about, is the Raider Stadium. But Nevada is the get-it-done state. And we are a place where people that are interested in doing business have immediate access from the governor all the way down, and it makes a big difference. And if you came to our economic development board meetings and you saw our agenda and you saw the number of companies that we're approving and the diversity of those companies and the jobs that they're bringing and the high-paying jobs that they're bringing, and I guess I got to ask about your study, but the average weekly wage is the highest it's ever been in the history of Nevada right now. It's not high enough, but it's the highest that it's ever been.
So you brought up the stadium. I appreciate you producing this entire IndyTalks for me, so it saves me time. That's the same as Tesla. It's essentially just a huge giveaway of public money. No,
Your words. Yeah.
No, it is a giveaway. It's $750 million. So I'm wondering, did you have to get sold on that? I know you talked about being.
Yes.
I know you've talked about being with Mark Davis, and he was going to keep his promise. But that funding scheme of taking $750 million, I don't mean scheme pejoratively. I just meant.
Yeah, I don't agree with your word scheme.
Okay, but did you need to get sold that this was the right use of that money?
Absolutely. There is no doubt about. Frankly, when I first heard about even the whisper of the NFL coming to Nevada and us having the ability to have a stadium like that, I didn't think that there was any chance or something like that was possible.
Why?
Because it just seemed like a pipe dream at the time. And I guess backing up a little bit, because I think it's germane or it's relevant to my decision on the Raiders, is 2 years before that, UNLV had approached us to build a stadium,
right.
$300 to $400 million stadium. Actually, there was a $1.1 billion version of that stadium, and that funding stream likely would have come from the very exact same place. But I don't call it a scheme. This was the room tax. I believe that room tax is programmed and intended to invest in the infrastructure of Las Vegas. Some of that money is going to the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, $400 million of that. We have to have a first-class Convention and Visitors Authority, so that was the easy part of all that. With regard to the stadium, it obviously is going to bring us an NFL team, but it also will allow us to host events that we could never host before. It's not for sure, but we could have a Super Bowl. We could have the World Cup here. We could have a professional soccer team. UNLV will have a first-class stadium to play in that they didn't have before. I think it's going to bring a number of events that we couldn't do, and it just takes Las Vegas to that next level.
You say the room tax is a natural use of that, and Steve Hill has sold that too. The room tax has changed, though, over the years. You know that. 40% of the room tax now essentially goes towards education. So
but you know the background as to why
I do, but that is the fact, though, Governor, if you look at where it goes. So you essentially said, I'd rather give, you can do the math, I'd rather give $300 million to the Raiders than to public education.
I didn't say that. I disagree,
Really?
John.
Where's that quote?
No, to me, they're inextricably intertwined. You have to improve the economy and invest in the state and invest in our infrastructure, which will create more jobs, which will create more tax revenue, which will be invested in education. Yes, you're right. We could have done that, and we wouldn't have the stadium, but it's going to put thousands of people to work. The labor unions, and it'll create some more vertical construction that we haven't had in Las Vegas in some time. And I think at the end of the day, it is going to be very beneficial to education. As I said, that money to me is being spent on its intended purpose.
So let's talk about the other pipe dream that a lot of people think is out there, which is Amazon. Mm-hmm. What'd you offer them?
Well, I read the editorial in the RJ today, but in any event,
what is this RJ you speak of?
I guess as much as I can say is that our offer will not require a special session. So in order to get Amazon here, it will not take us out of any statutory regime that we have as we speak. So I think you can read through the tea leaves. There's no extraordinary offer here. This is.
Then how do we have any shot?
I think
we're
we
the
have a great
can-do
shot.
state?
Absolutely.
Oh, really?
That's the thing. If you looked at that application for Amazon, probably 2/3 of it didn't exist 5 years ago. And we were able to point to some things that we didn't have before that we now have because of the economic development that we have accomplished, because we were a capital for UAV, because we're a capital for autonomous vehicles, all those things. And so I think it's not just about the money. I mean, certainly the money is relevant to all this. There are close to 300 applications, I believe, to get this done. But where we have taken Southern Nevada, I absolutely believe that we're going to be one of the top candidates for this, because it's not, we already have 1 million square feet here in Las Vegas of a distribution center that we recently opened, or Amazon recently opened. But given the constellation of assets that we have, I believe we have a very good chance of getting it done.
Really, I mean, not just being your normal optimistic self. You really believe, I mean,
Oh, there's no doubt.
substantively, we have a shot.
Yes, we do.
So tell us a little bit more about the package. I know that was
Yeah, but this is the package right here. You're looking at it. I mean, we have assets that other big cities have. You know, the things that Amazon would look at. We didn't have that before. We have that now. That was one of the purposes of this last legislative session, and me putting together that, or you know, the administration, that workforce development regime. All the pieces are in place, and we have assets that other states don't have. And when you put that together, that brings us into the conversation.
one of the things that comes up, I know, is education. When you're trying to get economic development, you've mentioned the education system and some of the things that you've done. I want to talk a little bit about education. I want to start with just a simple question. Are you proud of the state's education system?
I'm more proud than I was before. We have a long ways to go. There is no doubt about that. Again, that was one of the things that made a big impression on me when I was a candidate for governor. I made a commitment to visit 100 schools, and I was able to accomplish that. But when you get in a classroom, you talk to a principal, you talk to a teacher, you see those little guys, and we have half-day kindergarten, 3.5 hours with 20 to 30 students in a class. Do you really believe that you could get a child to grade level and get them prepared for first grade when you have that? We had barely any pre-K. Larger class sizes. You go to the English language learners. I visited a class here in Southern Nevada, and it was a kindergarten class, and there were approximately 20 kids. There were 11 different languages in that one classroom by itself. So I'm a visual learner. I mean, I really have to see things, and that made a huge impact on me. That was part of the frustration of my first legislative session, and mostly second legislature, is we didn't have the money. And that's why, slowly but surely, that's why we created the Victory Schools, which are for the kids in poverty, the 20 poorest zip codes. That's why we created the Victory Schools for English language learners. We started out with $50 million. That's now $150 million, $50 million investment in the Victory Schools. Over the course of these past 7 years, we've added over $1 billion in spending on K through 12 education. Our graduation rates have improved more than any other state in the country, but we're still one of the worst. And that's why I say, I can't say that I'm proud of where we are. I'm proud of our teachers. They work extremely hard with the assets that they have, and it was my job to give them more assets and more resources. That's why I signed that bond rollover, so that we could have in Clark County $5 billion of investment to build more schools and enhance the older schools and give them the infrastructure that they need. You know, but it's not just about Southern Nevada. You visit a little town called Austin, Nevada, and I go there. The total enrollment of their high school is 4 kids. I'm not kidding, 4 kids. And then you go over to Green Valley and you see, 3,000 plus kids. But the point being that a child or a student, a young man or a young woman in Austin, Nevada should have the same educational experience that somebody in an urban setting has as well. That's why I was out in Beatty 3 months ago, or a couple months ago this summer, and Beatty is now just as connected as any city in the country. So part of this has been building the infrastructure so that all the students could have an equal educational experience. And hopefully, it's one of those things, sometimes you have to plant the trees that you'll never get to sit in their shade. And I think history will show that the investments we made now made a big difference.
You know, it's interesting because you talk about that, and I see pictures all over social media all the time. You actually go into these schools, and I see a meeting with the students, and you talk about the experience of going into this classroom, and these teachers are just faced with these incredible challenges with all the different languages. And as much as you got there at a time when this may not be the right analogy, but I'll use it anyhow because I'm talking now. The ship was sinking, and you were trying to save it, and yet still, even as much those numbers that you talk about with the victory schools, what you've done on ELL. I mean, the $1.5 billion tax package. People don't understand what was in that. I don't think really, Governor, and how visionary that was. And you know, I believe that, and I said it, and yet. There's still a caste system, essentially, where there are kids in schools that have not gotten the enhancements that others have. And so kids are getting disparate educations, especially here in Clark County. Kids who will, you know, you did the read by 3, and that's great, but still, as much as our graduation rates has gone up, we are setting up still so many kids to fail. That's got to be so frustrating for you.
Well, I guess I'd like to hear a little more specificity as to what you're saying, but one of the things that we included in this last budget is the weighted student funding. And as I said, we've increased that funding, but it costs more to educate certain types of students. And that's why we made a massive contribution to that, to fix that disparity that you've talked about. Is it perfect? No. You know, you talk about the sinking ship, and any of you that have read The Perfect Storm, there's that chapter on the zero moment. And I didn't want that to be that zero moment where the ship sank. So I think that we've righted the ship. I think the ship is making progress, but certainly there's a lot of distance to go. I will assure you that I'm going to be watching very closely what the next gubernatorial candidates are going to be saying.
I can't wait for that discussion.
Yeah. But, you know, as you said, I'm proud of what we've done, but by no means is the job finished.
We'll get to politics a little bit later. I'll save the best for last. But one thing that I know has been a very important a policy for you is school choice, and it's very controversial, as you know. You seem to really believe in it, though. Why do you believe in school choice? A lot of people think that school choice is essentially an acceptance that the public education system isn't working, that it's going to be the gradual erosion of the public school system. You know all the arguments.
Yeah.
Why do you believe in it so deeply, Governor?
Because I've visited the schools, and you know, every kid's different. And every child deserves, and every parent, frankly, should have the ability to decide where where their kids should go to school.
That's a minority of people, like not a lot of people in class.
No, and we had, believe me, and I...
No heckling.
You know, it's hard. I get it, but I really don't believe that it dilutes the public school system. We definitely had a debate this session about school choice, and you know, we have opportunity scholarships, and people forget, you know, the opportunity scholarship is for a child that is, or a family that is 300% or less of the poverty line. There are thousands of students that are benefiting from that opportunity scholarship. They're doing extremely well. They're going to the school that they want to go to, and it is working. So I think people forget that we already have school choice in our state. We have charter schools as well that are thriving, and it is not a bad word. And so, you know, I think that it, you know, as time moves on, you'll see the benefits of that. But as I said, I was just at a charter school a couple weeks ago, and the students are doing extremely well. I've visited schools and talked to students that are the beneficiaries of the Opportunity Scholarship, and they're getting to go to a school that they never would have gotten to go to before.
Education savings accounts, though, would have been something dramatically different. They would have been a huge change here in Nevada. And I know you believe in education savings accounts. At some point last session, you decided that you weren't willing to hold up the session, that you weren't willing to have a special session to get even just some amount of money into statute, Governor. Why did you make that decision? If you really believe in school choice, you could have done it. I don't know if you know this, but you're the most powerful guy in the state.
You know, I know that I could have called a special session, and I know, but you know, I'm not going to hold up. There's too many other people that would be affected by that. And
what does that mean?
well, for example, the school districts need to set their budgets. They need to know what is going to happen, and it just, to me, it would make us no different than Washington, D.C. And I knew that the Democrats would probably dig in, and you'd get into this stalemate, and then I think it would cause people to lose trust and faith in the way that government works in the state of Nevada. And by the way, it wasn't that linear as you say. I mean, part of the ultimate resolution was putting an additional $20 million into the Opportunity Scholarship. So I felt like, wait a minute, here's a way, here's a lane to add, hundreds of more young men and women to be able to attend the school of their choice, and at the same time, not hold up the state and closing the budgets and allow the new bills and legislation that would be passed to move forward and, continue or hopefully maintain the confidence of the people of the state of Nevada that government in Nevada still works.
So you're really going to go with the Opportunity Scholarships as school choice spin, and you're going to leave it at that? Is that what we got?
I'm trying to understand whatever you're suggesting, but
Suggest.
so let's say this. I mean, school choice ESAs are still in the law. They're just not funded. And
minor point.
yeah. Well, and I guess I will go this far, but I'm not going to go into specifics. But there was a deal. There was a deal for education savings accounts, and somebody else blew it up. And
somebody else.
But there was a deal.
This is a nice room. You can name names here, Governor.
But there's the old saying that pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. And I did tell somebody that they're going to wish for that 5 minutes back. That 5 minutes back, you've got to know when to say yes. And because of that moment, we don't have education savings accounts.
Is that person running for a constitutional office this year, Governor?
Not saying a word.
Not saying a word. Okay. Well, let's talk about something that you don't talk about much, and that's social issues. I don't know how many people know you're Catholic.
Yes.
But you're pro-choice.
Yes.
How'd you get there?
I mean, at the end of the day, I believe that decision's up to a woman. It's her body, and it's her decision.
Did you always believe that?
Yes.
You've always believed that.
Yes.
You didn't go through some great transformation ever since you were a young man and you started thinking about these issues. You've been pro-choice.
I've always been pro-choice.
That's, what about other social issues? I'm wondering, I know you're a thoughtful guy. I mean, gay marriage, I think it seems to me that's been an issue where you maybe have had an evolution like some others have, maybe not. Tell me where you are on gay marriage.
I support gay marriage. Yeah.
But you haven't always, have you?
No, and it has been an evolution. And no, I mean, it's just, my best friends are gay. And they deserve to be happy. They deserve to be able to have the partner of their choice. And so, it's where I am now.
One thing I think is interesting about you is you were against legalizing pot.
Yes.
Now you're trying to deal with all the issues, revenue and whether it should be in gaming. You just had gaming policy. It seems to me that it's kind of strange that you'd be against that for this reason. Let me play devil's advocate with you here. You could make an argument that gambling is a lot more addictive than pot is. So why not?
I wouldn't know. I've never smoked it, John.
Me neither. It's a true story. I've said it many times. I've never smoked pot either. But gambling's very addictive. I think the gambling addiction problem is probably a lot more sub rosa than people think. I think the numbers are probably bigger. It's a much bigger problem. So why not be for legalizing pot? Is that your old law enforcement thing coming? The AG? What is it?
No, they're both fruit, but one's apple and one's an orange, John. I don't, yes, they're both addictions, but I don't agree with you in terms of making that comparison. But, I've had the benefit of serving as a judge, and I will tell you, when I did my sentencings, marijuana was almost always involved with that as a gateway. And
so you believe it's a gateway drug?
I do.
And that's the main reason you're opposed to legalization?
Yes. But you're right. I mean, the voters of the state approved it overwhelmingly, and once that was approved, I essentially sat down with my staff, sat down with the director of the Department of Taxation, and I wanted to make sure that it was regulated and that it was strictly regulated, that it was respected, and that we have a regulatory regime that is something that others would copy, just like we do with gaming regulation. I spent a lot of time with the governor of Colorado, Governor Hickenlooper, to try to learn get some lessons learned from what happened there, so that we wouldn't make the same mistakes that Colorado has made. I mean, I know I can be I guess I'll put it this way, that so far it has run very smoothly. I don't support the pot lounges. I don't think that's
Why not?
I just don't think that's something we need in the state. And the other thing, and this is something we talked about in the Gaming Policy Committee, is we have to be careful, we being the state, of taking things too far. The federal government has so far, not intervened with recreational marijuana or medical marijuana, but if you start opening pot lounges or business operations like that, it may invite more federal scrutiny.
Have you talked to the Attorney General of the United States about this? I mean, he's very opposed to pot. There's some talk that he may actually try to shut it down in the States at some point. Have you ever talked to him about it?
Yes.
And?
And what?
Should we be concerned?
There was a gentleman's agreement that, what was said in that room would stay in that room. But I did have a conversation with him about it.
When?
It would have been in February of this year.
And so you received assurances from him that he would not interfere?
I did not. Objection leading,
I told you still wanted to be a judge. Background checks. You're a pro-gun rights guy. You're a gun owner?
I'm not.
You're not a gun owner. You were pretty strong on it, though. You vetoed a bill at one time on background checks. I don't think you supported question one, right?
Right.
Was that a mistake?
No.
Especially with all the mass shootings. Now, I know some of these have nothing to do with guns that were purchased illegally, and it appears that what happened here horrifically on October 1st didn't. But a lot of people have rethought their position on that with all the mass shootings that have occurred in this country.
No, and I'll say this much, and I don't know if we're going to get into October 1st, but that had a profound impact on me. I was home alone and got the phone call. Immediately came next.
Who called you, Governor? Who called you to inform you about it?
Someone on my staff.
Oh.
And I spoke with the sheriff soon thereafter. Watched CNN just like everybody else, but was getting updates, and landed here in Las Vegas at 6 in the morning. Immediately went to the hospital, visited with patients and families, and talked to some of the victims. Went to the site, and I hope no one ever has to see what I saw. Went to Metro and talked to the men and women of Metro and the first responders. So, met with, even went to the coroner's office a couple days later to, and please keep them in your thoughts and prayers. I mean, they call themselves the last responders, and, this was really hard on them. But in any event, that has taken a piece of me away that I'll never get back. And so yes, that is very relevant to my thought process and my calculus with regard to background checks. I will say this, and I don't know if you've covered it, but regardless of the legal opinion that was given, the State Department of Public Safety now will take voluntary background checks and do them for free. So that is a different policy change that has been implemented. Somebody may not be mandated, but if somebody is doing a private gun sale and exchange, they can go to the state of Nevada and get a background check for free.
I did not know that. No, I did not know that. I mean, I believe, just in the way you told the story, everybody in this room believes that it had a profound impact on you. Has it made you think maybe I'm wrong on
Well, it's not that black and white, John. It just isn't. And, this individual, and I'll leave it at that. I mean, this is someone that acquired all his weapons legally. Obviously, he modified them. It wouldn't, I mean, you hear this all the time, I'm sure, it would not have changed the outcome there. So, it's a very difficult question. We asked for that opinion from the Attorney General's office because I wanted clarity on that, and frankly, it didn't change. I mean, it didn't change anything. So, but in any event, I've tried to do the best I can, and with the confines and the boundaries that I have, and that being providing those, the state will provide free background checks on a private gun sale.
I want to just slowly segue in about 10 or 15 minutes we have left or so, or if I can keep you here all night, I will, and talk about a little bit about the state of Nevada and the political situation here. From the days when you and I first met in the assembly, it's become much more partisan up there in the
Breakfast
legislature.
at the omelet house.
Yes,
Right?
exactly. I know, like most governors, you're thrilled that this is a very strong executive branch state, but it seems to me that there's a very disturbing trend. You just up in Carson City, affected by term limits, good people more and more leaving, really good legislators not thinking that it's worth being up there. You have these political operatives running around the buildings, press releases coming out. A few may even have attacked you last session. I'm just wondering how long this is sustainable, the system that we have now.
How long is it sustainable?
The part-time legislature, we pay them nothing, we meet every other year. Is the system working, Governor?
I don't know if that's the essence of the problem. I think the essence of the problem is term limits. I was one of those that took the bait and thought term limits was a good thing. I'm somebody who had the privilege of working with a Joe Dini and a John Marvel and a John Carpenter and a Bill Raggio. You could go down the line, and the experience that they had, and now, and I know there's some legislators out there, but I mean, when I was a freshman, even the thought of chairing a committee was absurd, and that doesn't meant to be a pejorative of any freshman legislator who's serving as the chairman of a committee, but you have that institutional knowledge that is extremely valuable. You have legislators who've sat at the table and negotiated, that have had the benefit of the experience of prior sessions, and now it's completely different. And as you say, there are good people that by the time they're getting that experience, they have to go. And you know what? It's a huge advantage for an executive, for someone like me. It's a massive advantage because I've had the legislative experience. I had the executive experience at the AG's office, and as a governor, I have the benefit of having prepared the budget. I know the budget, and you have legislators who are dealing with a budget for the first time. And it's not saying I'm pulling one over anybody. I'm not. I mean, I've always been very transparent, but I know what's in there. And you just can't learn that in 120 days. You just can't. It's impossible. I mean, it's volumes. It's thousands of pages. So that's what I think needs to be corrected and I don't know if anyone's willing to do it, is to overturn the term limits. I was supportive of limited annual sessions, so you would, in the off year, have a 90-day or a 60-day or even whatever, a 30-day budget session to make sure that everything is moving along. But I'm not supportive of full-time legislators. I don't think that's a good idea. But I think with a little bit of tinkering with the system I have, I think we can get it back to where it should be.
You mentioned, and you didn't want to talk about the moment when you think that ESAs could have been done, and you think that someone, and I think I know who you're talking about, but I won't say anything. There was a lot of partisanship last session, and for a guy who I think rightly is known as a pragmatist and a guy who does reach across the aisle. What, you have 41 vetoes? That, as Strother Martin famously said in Cool Hand Luke, is a failure to communicate, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I don't have the single season record, but I do have the career record.
That's right.
But no, and you wrote about this. In the beginning of this last session, we had 2015, and there were a lot of bills that were passed that I signed, and I made it very clear at the beginning of the session that I was not going to walk back any of those bills. I just wasn't going to do it. I think they were good policy. I wouldn't have signed them in the first place. So why in the world would I sign a bill or support legislation that would undermine or dilute any legislation that I sign? And I made that very, very clear. I think, and this isn't the blame game, but I think I could have had a lot less vetoes if, obviously if those bills weren't brought to my desk. But in the defense of the Democrats, they have constituencies too, and they have to show that they can, pass a bill and hear a bill and get it to my desk, and that horrible, mean governor, probably a little bit different language than that, vetoed those bills. But a lot of those vetoes were difficult. I mean, you read them. I mean, there were bills that I really struggled with, and I took a lot of pride in the fact that I felt like my vetoes were all policy-based. They weren't partisan whatsoever. Those vetoes were things that I believed in.
The atmosphere, though, up there clearly is becoming, in my view, much more toxic. And now you have, and I know you've spoken out a little bit about this, now you have these recalls that are going on that are just going to make poison the well even more, whether they're successful or not. I mean, are you worried about what's going to happen in the future?
No, and from day one, I oppose those recalls. I think that is horrible policy, horrible. Mm-hmm. And it's opened a door that won't get shut again, and it just kind of escalates the bad side of politics. As I said, I'm a student of Raggio, Laxalt, and Gwynn, and that would have never happened in those times. Not to say that I'm naive, but I was very disappointed, and I was very public in my opposition to that. Again, I don't always agree with the legislators that they're attempting to recall, but I respect them. And actually, they've supported a lot of my legislation, so there's a lot of mutual respect there. I hope these recalls fail. I think that those that are supporting them should have been a little bit more vocal and public about why they're doing that, because, as I said, it has opened this Pandora's box that won't get shut again. And I guess it's always fine when it's not happening to you. And when the shoe's put on the other foot, I think some people are going to be sorry that they opened that door.
Yeah, I should applaud for that. Have you called any of the Republican senators and said, what the heck are you doing?
No. I think it's pretty clear what my position has been on that, so I don't think I need to call them. I mean, that's the thing, is the horse out of the barn. And as I said, I know that it's in the Secretary of State's office with regard to the signature counting and what have you, but it's just a distraction that we don't need.
On another political issue that's come up even before the governor's race started, and we'll get to that in a second, you've used pretty apocalyptic language describing what you think would happen if the commerce tax, which was very hard fought for you to get passed, is repealed. Now, the criticism is, it's not a huge amount of money. Why are you getting so upset about it in the scheme of the budget? Why is it that it worries you so much?
Well, I'll say this. I expended a lot of political capital to get that done. There were some legislators who, frankly, their vote cost them their political careers to get that done, and I will respect them and thank them forever. But anybody who proposes to eliminate the commerce tax, there's another side of the ledger. And if you're going to eliminate $400 million in commerce tax money, you got to cut somewhere. And there are only a couple places that you can cut in the state budget, and that is in education or health and human services. there's the prison system, or the corrections is the rest of that, but you're not going to be able to cut there. So if you're going to eliminate that commerce tax, you better be able to look people in the eye and tell them what piece of the K through 12 that you're going to cut when you do that. And frankly, if anybody's proposing to do that, that should be the first question that that you ask them. And in that, that's that piece of it, but it also has stabilized our state budget and has really not put it in created a tax for those to pay that I think, frankly, were getting a free ride before. So, they need to contribute to the state as well. And we built in some things into it with regard to the credits for the modified business tax to create the fairness for the people who employ more people. But I think that it's an important piece, an important component moving forward to make sure that we have stable tax policy as we move on.
Will you be vocal about this during the campaign?
Depends what the candidates say.
Which brings me to a few concluding questions for you, Governor. You mentioned your last year, and you're not going to take your foot off the gas. You're not going to just travel around collecting historical memorabilia or whatever else. You go to ribbon cuttings.
Ribbon cuttings are good, by the way.
Yeah, okay, they're all right. And then hopefully the legislature won't be back if you don't have to call a special session, or they call themselves in. What a law that is, huh?
2/3, though.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. So what are your goals in the last year? What does Brian Sandoval want to get done before his final year is out?
I think the most important thing for me, and we've talked about this as a staff, is we passed some very important pieces of legislation with regard to opioids, with regard to juvenile justice, with regard to workforce development, and there's a lot that goes into those bills. And I want to ensure that all the departments that are responsible for implementing that legislation are getting that done. Frankly, and I'm not going to be specific, but we've discovered in a few places where people are dragging their feet on some things, and so I have to write...
On some legislation that was passed, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
And so, I have to write herd on that to make sure it gets done. And selfishly, I don't want anyone in 2019 to say, the governor kind of took a flyer and just kind of rode off into the sunset and wasn't paying attention. I'm not going to let that happen. I want to make sure that everything gets done. And frankly, to get those things done is going to be to the benefit of the state, to make sure that particularly in workforce development, that people are getting quality jobs, that pay well, that have good benefits in industries that we didn't have before. That's how we're able to attract these businesses, because we can sell that we have a very sophisticated workforce development system.
You are chairman of the National Governors Association. I don't know if many people know that. Can you do anything at the NGA that can help the state?
Absolutely.
Like what?
Yeah. So my initiative as chairman of the National Governors Association is called Ahead of the Curve, and essentially it is about how technology can affect state policy, particularly in transportation. And so at CES, there is going to be a meeting of the national governors, one of the working groups on transportation, and it is a great way to feature the state. And people are discovering that Nevada is indeed a capital for unmanned aerial vehicles, and we're in the process of bidding on being one of the states for some specific testing that would really be a strong feather in our cap. We're in the process of attracting companies that are cutting edge with regard to autonomous vehicles. So this really gives me the ability to put Nevada and feature Nevada and put us on a platform. And I think that it is opening people's eyes that, if you're looking to start a business or move a business, Nevada's always now in the Final Four, where we weren't in that conversation before. And so, selfishly, as the chairman, I'm going to do everything I can to feature our state. Thank you.
I know the kind of guy you are. You may not even want to answer this question, but I hope you'll give it a shot. And a lot of people, as they come towards the end of a long tenure in a position, they think back. And do you have any regrets?
Regrets, yes. I think, I knew you'd ask this question. One of the hardest things for me, if I had a do-over, I guess, is what you're asking me is what happened with regard to mental health in this state and what happened at Ross and Neal. I think that story, I didn't get on it soon enough. I will say this, is that never was there a person who was sent somewhere, without a plan for them. There were mistakes made internally that resulted in what happened with that gentleman who was sent to Sacramento. They didn't have what was called the catcher's mitt, waiting for him when he arrived. But never, there was an impression that we had a map of the United States and that we would have a patient and we would throw a dartboard and we would put this person on a bus and send them there without any resources or would have that. That never happened. And I didn't take seriously enough the way that story went and how it got exaggerated, and if I had jumped on that earlier. But I will tell you, the lesson learned in that, for me, and that was a big catalyst in my decision to opt in on the Affordable Care Act, because it caused me to become very familiar with the way that we treat the mentally ill in the state of Nevada and how we weren't doing what we should be doing. And it brought tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars and it enabled single childless adults to get mental health care that they didn't have before. And then I met with Sylvia Burwell, who was the former head of the Health and Human Services, the Cabinet Secretary of Health and Human Services, and convinced her to increase the daily reimbursement rate from $300 a day to $800 a day, which opened up hundreds of beds, particularly here in Las Vegas. In fact, it was so successful that we weren't even able to fill the beds in the state system. And then I'm leading you now. But in any event, it reduced our expenses at the state level so much that we reduced portions of the budget for that, and that was called a cut. And it wasn't a cut because we were able to get so many individuals treated in the private system. But in any event, your question was, do I have any regrets? Well, that was one of my regrets, that I didn't get on that soon enough. But like anything else, if you make a mistake, you learn from it and you work on that and make it better. And I feel like now our system is much better and people are getting mental health care that weren't getting it before.
A couple final questions before Elizabeth kills me. You can endorse Adam Laxalt to succeed you?
I haven't endorsed anybody. And as I said, I'm going to wait to see what the candidates have to say. But I'm not going to support a candidate that's going to seek to undo what we've done in the past 7 years. I'm not going to do it.
Do you consider repealing the commerce tax undoing what you've done?
Yes.
So that then you won't endorse him because that's what he's proposed.
Well, I'll have a conversation with him about that. I don't think this isn't the first time I've said that, but I think, and you've heard me say it, I think it would be devastating to our state budget.
You can't endorse somebody who's going to devastate the state, could you, Governor?
No.
Okay. You are going to.
I let him lead me for the first time.
I waited until he was exhausted.
Yeah.
You are going to endorse Dean Heller, though, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Finally, a lot of people. Go ahead and want to clap for Heller. It's fine with me. Go ahead. I think a lot of people in this room are wondering about you, Governor, what you're going to do next. Mm-hmm. Be as candid as you can about, I mean, do you not know? I mean, do you want to run for something else? Whether it's, you don't want to run for anything else. I mean, there's some cockamamie theories out there that maybe Senator Heller won't run and that you'll decide to run for the Senate. I've never gotten the sense that you're interested in going to Washington.
I will not be on the ballot in 2018. That's just the way it is. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I won't be on the ballot next year. And I know those are theories. I've never, my understanding is that Senator Heller is going to be filing and will be running aggressively for re-election, and I will give him my full-throated support.
What do you want to do?
What I'd like to do next, I'd like to teach. That's one of the things that I've always wanted to do. If I wasn't in politics or public service, or I wasn't a lawyer, I'd be a teacher and a coach. And this may be an opportunity for me, after I'm finished here, to hopefully share some of the experiences. I've had the opportunity to serve in all three branches of government. I've served in the legislature, I've served as a judge, and I've served in the executive branch, and I've been a regulator, both on the TRPA and as a member of the Nevada Gaming Commission. So I've already had conversations with the Ohio State University College.
Thanks for waiting all night to bring that up.
Well, I got to ask him a question, and I was going to ask, when is Michigan going to beat Ohio State? But in any event, I'd like to teach, and in fact, I'm going to have a conversation with the dean of the UNLV Law School, Rebels. But I'd like to do that. I don't know if that's a full-time or a part-time basis, but that's one of the things I'm looking at. But frankly, I haven't had any conversations otherwise. I just didn't think it would be appropriate for me, particularly in a legislative year, to start having those types of conversations as to what's next. I know I want to stay in Nevada. I love this place. I love this state. And
what about, I mean, there are some people who talk, and I don't think this is a cockamamie as some others think. Brian Sandoval is the kind of guy that we really need on a presidential ticket, maybe going forward. I mean, and believe me, you know, I'm not one to shamelessly flatter, but I mean, you have served in all three branches of government. You're as qualified as maybe some people who have held the office. Is this something seriously?
I'm not answering that one.
Has it gone through your mind?
It has not. It has not. We had that debate here in Las Vegas, and I was there and had the privilege of watching that and meeting with most of the candidates at the time. And frankly, I guess we'll end where we started. I have made some pretty unconventional decisions as the governor, and I would get sliced like mincemeat in one of those primary debates. But I tell you what, I'd be loud and proud and stand behind my record, regardless of what the outcome would be.
Governor, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks to everybody for coming too. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim. Well done.